Here is the script you provided, formatted exactly as requested. No words have been changed or removed, and the length remains uncompressed. Only the timestamps have been removed, with punctuation and paragraph breaks added for clarity and flow. The fastest win isn't the one that changes your life. It's the one that changes your costume. I've seen people make it at 22, 25, 29. New title, new money, new followers. And inside, it's like they're holding their breath the whole time, because the win arrived before the self did. So, every morning becomes a small negotiation. How do I keep this version of me alive? And then there's the other person. The one everyone subtly worries about. The one who's still figuring it out. The one who takes longer, changes direction, disappears for a while, reappears with a new perspective, then disappears again. They don't rise fast. They rise whole. So, here's the question that messes with our whole cultural storyline. Why do some people look behind right up until the day they become unshakable? That's what we're talking about today through Carl Jung's lens. Not to label you like a personality quiz, but to notice patterns. Because late bloomer isn't a flaw. A lot of the time, it's a psyche doing its homework before it accepts the spotlight. And if you've ever watched someone win early and then lose the plot, burn their relationships, implode their health, sabotage their own purpose, you already know speed can be a spiritual distraction. Late bloomers tend to carry this first trait that looks like hesitation from the outside, but it's actually depth. They interrogate reality before they sign their name on it. They don't just ask, "How do I succeed?" Their mind keeps tugging on bigger threads. What is success serving? Who do I become if I get it? What part of me is trying to buy safety with achievement? This is that intuitive meaning-making function that refuses to treat life like a checklist. It can delay visible progress because they're not willing to build a future on a lie that feels convenient. If that's you, share in the comments. What's the question you can't stop asking lately? The second trait is emotional honesty as a strategy, not a vibe. Early winners can be brilliant at performance, being impressive, being likable, being productive. Late bloomers are pulled toward congruence. They care about whether their yes is clean. They notice when they're chasing something that doesn't match their values, and their whole system starts resisting. That resistance can look like procrastination, switching paths, or losing motivation. But underneath, it's self-respect. It's a deeper intelligence saying, "I'm not giving my life force to a goal that makes me smaller." And that brings us to the third trait. They befriend their shadow earlier than most people do. Shadow doesn't mean bad. It means the parts of you that got exiled. Needs you learned to hide. Anger you swallowed. Creativity you were told wasn't practical. Sensitivity you tried to outgrow. Early winners can get rewarded for staying in the acceptable persona. Late bloomers, on the other hand, keep crashing into the unlived parts of themselves. They can't maintain a shiny identity if it costs them their soul. So they do the uncomfortable work. Therapy, journaling, solitude, spiritual seeking, hard conversations, and endings that look irrational to anyone watching from the outside. This is why late bloomers become harder to break, because life already broke the false parts for them. Slowly, privately, piece by piece, until what remained was real. If you've been in a season where you're shedding identities, losing patience with superficial goals, craving a life that feels aligned, you're not behind. You're in integration. And integration is the part that makes success stable. Late bloomers have a moment, usually in the middle of everyone else's highlight reel, where they stop trying to earn their place. It's not because they give up. It's because something inside them gets tired of negotiating with a life that doesn't feel true. That's where the fourth trait starts to form. They don't chase, they integrate. Early winners can be incredible at pursuit. They pick a target, compress their personality around it, and run. Late bloomers move differently. They keep asking, "Can I bring all of me with me?" They don't want a life that only rewards the presentable parts. They want a life that can hold their contradictions, ambition and softness, logic and intuition, spirituality and practicality, intensity and rest. Integration is when your inner world stops being a civil war. You're not trying to silence one part so another part can succeed. You're building a life where your parts cooperate. And that's why late bloomers look slow. They're not just building a career. They're building an inner ecosystem. The fifth trait is a kind of patience that isn't passive. It's delayed gratification, but not as discipline, more as devotion. Late bloomers can sit in a chapter that isn't glamorous because they're listening for something deeper than applause. They learn, they observe, they refine. Their timelines stretch because they're not willing to cut corners that would cost them their integrity. This is also why their confidence looks different. It's not loud, it's rooted. It's the calm of someone who has met themselves in the dark and didn't abandon who they found there. If you've ever felt like you're late because you didn't take the obvious path, I want you to consider the possibility that your psyche was protecting you from a victory you weren't ready to hold. Now, here's the sixth trait, and this one shocks people. Late bloomers tend to be less hypnotized by external status, not because they're above it, but because they felt the hollowness of it. They've tasted the weird emptiness of doing something impressive that didn't feed the soul. So, their motivation evolves. They start wanting impact over image, meaning over metrics, and alignment over approval. They might still want money, recognition, and success, let's be real, but they want it to support their life, not replace it. This is where stable success starts, when your goals stop being a way to escape yourself. The seventh trait is their relationship with failure. Early winners can fear falling because they built their identity on staying up. Late bloomers have a different orientation. They treat mistakes like information. They're more willing to be a beginner again, more willing to be humbled, more willing to release what isn't working, even if it means looking behind. Because their self-worth isn't stapled to one performance. It's connected to evolution. And this leads to the trait that delays their success but makes it last. Trait 8. They refuse premature identity. This is the part that can feel maddening in real time because the world rewards early definition. What do you do? Who are you? What's your niche? Late bloomers are allergic to locking themselves into a role before their psyche is ready. They experiment. They shapeshift. They let life teach them. They're less likely to commit to a version of themselves that was chosen out of fear. Premature identity creates fast results and fragile foundations. You can win quickly when you pick a mask and stick to it. But if that mask isn't you, your success becomes a cage. Late bloomers delay the mask. They wait until the inside matches the outside. So when they finally commit, it's not an act, it's a home. And that's why late bloomers are harder to break, because they didn't build a life to impress strangers. They built a life they can live inside. Now, let's tie these traits together into the real reason late bloomers become unexpectedly powerful later on, and how to tell if you're in a delay that's actually preparation, not punishment. Sometimes the delay isn't life blocking you. It's life refusing to reward a version of you that would collapse under the reward. Late bloomers usually don't realize this until they look back and notice a pattern. Every time they tried to force the fast path, something inside them sabotaged it. Not because they were self-destructive, but because their psyche has a built-in alarm system for misalignment. The same sensitivity that made them question themselves is the sensitivity that later makes them impossible to manipulate, impossible to fake, and impossible to buy with shiny distractions. Here's the deeper reason these traits create stability. Late bloomers learn how to hold tension without turning it into chaos. Early success can feel like relief, like the world finally stops judging you. But if you haven't built inner capacity, success becomes pressure. People expect consistency. Your lifestyle expands. Your identity becomes public property. And suddenly you're not living your life. You're maintaining a brand of yourself. That's why some early winners lose everything, because their foundation was external. The moment the external world shifts, the whole structure wobbles. Late bloomers build differently. Their foundation is internal. They've spent years making peace with uncertainty, learning their own patterns, confronting the shadow, and letting their motivation mature from prove myself into express myself. So when something good finally arrives, it doesn't land on a brittle nervous system. It lands on a self that has already been strengthened by seasons that were invisible to everyone else. And that's the part most people don't understand. Late bloomers don't grow slower. They grow deeper. They learn the difference between desire and compensation. Desire is clean and alive. It doesn't need to justify itself. Compensation is the hungry pursuit that tries to patch an old wound: attention, safety, belonging, and worth. A lot of early wins are compensation wins. The achievement is trying to solve a wound it can't actually solve. Late bloomers tend to spot that dynamic earlier because they've already been forced to sit with the wound. So, when they finally pursue something, it's less frantic. It's more intentional. Their goals have a quieter energy. And that quiet is what makes it sustainable. Another reason their success lasts: they don't confuse intensity with truth. They've felt the rush of a new idea that wasn't right for them. They've been pulled into relationships, careers, and identities that looked perfect on paper and felt wrong in the soul. So, they develop discernment. They learn how their body and intuition signal yes versus "this is me trying to earn love." They stop romanticizing urgency. They respect timing. That alone filters out so many self-sabotage loops. And once that discernment sets in, something surprising happens. Late bloomers become magnetic. Not because they're trying to attract, but because they're coherent. Their energy isn't split. Their yes and no are trustworthy. Their presence has a grounded frequency that people feel without being able to explain. They're not selling a persona. They're transmitting a reality. If you're watching this and thinking, okay, but what if I'm just behind? Here's a reality check that's both comforting and challenging. If your delay is filled with avoidance, numbness, and shrinking, it might be fear running the show. But if your delay is filled with learning, inner work, curiosity, healing patterns, upgrading your boundaries, and shedding identities that don't fit anymore, that's not being behind. That's preparation. Late bloomers don't rise fast. They rise whole. And when they finally succeed, it doesn't look like a random breakthrough. It looks like the natural consequence of years of integration. Their relationships don't collapse the moment they get busy. Their health doesn't get traded for status. Their sense of self doesn't get outsourced to numbers. They can handle the expansion because they trained in the unseen arena first. So, I want to end with a question that's not meant to be cute. It's meant to be real. What are you building in private right now that you'll be grateful for later? And what part of you is being asked to mature before life gives you the next door? Share your answer in the comments, even one honest sentence, because someone reading might realize they're not behind, they're in the making. And if you've been carrying this quietly, I want you to know you're not doing it alone. And if you want more videos like this, depth psychology, shadow work, meaning, and the kind of growth that actually lasts, subscribe to the Fractal Wisdom channel. This is a space for people who are building from the inside out. And remember, if you're a late BL,